Okay. Describe when you heard about Pearl Harbor and what effect did it have on you and your family?
Well, I was home by myself out in the country. We lived on a farm, and I heard the news over the radio and pretty upset about it. And I think President Roosevelt then spoke later.
Where were you living at the time? Were you living in Palmyra?
No, I lived out on the farm northeast of here,
Okay.
Modesto, really.
Were you drafted after that, or did you enlist?
I was a junior in high school back then, so I didn't go to the Army, but I was drafted after that, after I got out of school.
Were you happy with the branch of the service that you were drafted into?
Yeah.
Good. How many of your high school friends enlisted or went into the service?
Well, just my brother and his good friend were in the same class in school. Glenn Crum, he was a pilot, piloted P-51s, and my brother was a mechanic on airplanes. They enlisted right away, and my brother went to enlist. They were in St. Louis and going to school, and he went to the draft board. They didn't even have any record of him, but he enlisted and stayed in, both of them for 30 years, I think.
Do you recall your first days in the service and like what it felt like to be in the service?
Oh yeah, yeah. Had my hair mowed off and everything, and the calisthenics and everything. And got you in shape. Those hikes and things every morning, and pretty soon it became a regular thing. And I think it was good for me for that. Quite an experience.
Can you tell me about your boot camp training experiences, like what you went through?
Well, it wasn't bad. You know, they call you out early in the morning and trot you around a quarter around the base a few times before breakfast, and then of course regular time. You know, it's pretty early to get up before daylight and everything. And did that and ate a good breakfast. And then pretty soon we go out to the field, hike out about 10 miles or 5 miles, whatever it was.
Were you like in full gear? Did you have how much?
No pack or anything. And then that didn't last too long, because one day we came back in, I imagine about 2 weeks probably. The first sergeant came in and says, "Anybody in here can type?" And I said, "Well, I can." And he said, "Well, come with me." And so he took me over to the office where they make out the morning report and account for all the soldiers, and whether they're sick or whether they're there or gone or what. But they call them roll every morning, and so that's what I learned to do then. That was my MOS number, as they call it. But I never did do that. Of course, June the 6th came along, the invasion of France, you see, and they jerked us out as replacements, a lot of us. So I went overseas by myself. I didn't go with my outfit.
Oh, I see. You said you were trained in artillery?
Yeah, took this basic training in the artillery on the guns. I got a picture there, somewhere right there, of the guns. I think that's it. Yeah.
That's the 105 millimeter?
Yeah.
That the howitzer?
155. That was a
155.
155. The 105 was the self-propelled 105s that we were working with overseas.
What did they do to train you on that sort of thing? I mean, was there any kind of special training?
I wasn't actually on the gun, but they told us about it, how to set it up, and went out on bivouac, you know, every week or so, and set in, and then they'd fire the shell. Well, my job was to relay a message from the captain to another battery, you know, like you were in combat, relay this message. I forget what they call it, a runner or some kind. Run back and forth. So I wasn't actually on the firing gun.
I see.
But I learned about it, you know. I wasn't in the fire direction center, which was unusual. That was really, I talked to Raymond the other night, and that's what he was in. That takes mathematics and stuff. Really interesting.
So then D-Day came along and you were shipped over. Were you still in the artillery then, or were you an infantryman after that?
No, I wasn't in the infantry. I was in the the artillery, and I went overseas as a replacement, and for anything.
For anything.
And immediately, then of course, it was quite a while to get over there. All this information in here, but the Bulge had broken out, and we were on the way into France in a train after arriving over there, and they were afraid the Germans would paratroop out where we were, and so they warned us in this reinforcement battalion. So one morning they called all the people with Cook's MOS number out, and they came back in and said they made us infantrymen. We're in the infantry. And so I wondered what I was going to do. They called us out, and they said, you're going to be half-track drivers. So they taught us to drive a half-track that night and gave us our license with the little parking lights, you know, and we drove across ditches and stuff. They gave us our license, and we were half-track drivers.
All in one night.
Yeah.
So what route did you take when you went from the U.S. to England? Did you take a ship or did you fly?
Well, we drove a train from Camp Gordon, Georgia, to up through on the East Coast, up to through Trenton, New Jersey, and into Washington, D.C. and Boston in that area, and left there. Camp Miles Standish was the name of the camp I think we were at, and we were processed there to go overseas, and got on trucks and went to a ship, and they said there was 10,000 soldiers on that ship. It was a New Amsterdam was the name of it. It was a luxury ship transferred into to carry soldiers and sailors. And they said there was 10,000 on there. Well, most people had a hammock to sleep in, but our group, there's 100 of us, in the dining room floor. That's what we had to sleep on. So that night, we stayed there quite a while after we got on that night, and we didn't know when we were going to leave, but in the middle of the night, I woke up and I'd hear that, I said, oh, we're going. We were moving, and it took 7 days to get over to Scotland and England. Got on a train in Scotland and rode from Scotland into England, then got an LST boat, came across the channel to France, Le Havre, France, and that's where the different areas of France where they had.
So was this your first trip out of the U.S. at this point? What division and unit did you belong to?
I was at 275th Artillery Battalion, actually, in combat. Of course, I went overseas. I started out at Camp Gordon, Georgia, in boot camp, and was sent overseas after June the 6th invasion of France as an independent replacement.
And then
later joined the 275th.
Okay. So where exactly were you stationed when you were over in Europe for most of the time?
Well, we went through France, then went across, from there went into Belgium. That's when we got into the replacement to the organization of the 275th Armored Field Artillery Battalion, which joined with the 7th Army. Mm-hmm. Later we went to the 9th Army and changed back and forth a couple times, mm-hmm. supporting one another.
Okay. Do you remember arriving in Europe and what it was like when you arrived?
You mean right off of the boat?
Yeah.
We of course had to wait. The boat was so big. There was 10,000 on there that had to take a little tug ship, looked like a little tug ship, loaded that thing full, and I was almost afraid to get in it. It looked like it would sink. But unload all these people in that little boat and ferry us over to land, say, at Scotland. And then we got on a train, passenger train, with a shade pulled down. It was dark by the time we got there, and we rode the train clear across Scotland and into England. Mm-hmm. And I remember I got it written in here, we walked through mud and everything to this camp in England to stay overnight in tents, and then walked quite a ways the next morning to the harbor where the LST boat was anchored. And we got on this LST boat, which is type of a boat that opens up the front, you know, and lets the tanks roll out. So we didn't really have a place to sleep on there. Some people did, but we didn't. We just had to pile up on a duffel bag or something, because they had trucks and everything else in there. And so going out the next morning across the channel, there was, I think, 3 ships, and I think I was in the first one. Anyhow, I got kind of sick, and I was out on the thing. It was awful rough, and it was just going leaning away over like this. I was just hanging on. I was the only one outside there, and all of a sudden I heard a noise, and hear the siren, and all the people came out on the deck with their guns and everything that mounted, and found out that it was a mine that went off. One of the ships had struck a mine or close to it, and it did a little damage to it, but didn't really hurt it. Jarred the generators loose, they said. But you couldn't hardly stay on, it was so rough. And the front of that ship was like this, and it hit that water so hard it go boing. You just hear that steel. It was rough, and that's how they, when we got to Le Havre, France, why that was Thanksgiving Day, and they gave us turkey that evening. Everybody had tents there. And in fact, one of them got on fire there and burned down. And that was near Fontainebleau, a little town, Fontainebleau there, where I think it was, there was a big castle there. You got to see that. Napoleon, I think, when he was a real short guy. Anyhow, I saw his bed and everything in there, and took pictures in there. And I remember they had ice cream and stuff there for us, you know, in that little town. And that's where I first learned the French word, s'il vous plaît, if you please, and a couple of words, beaucoup, different words like that, you know. They'd say, merci beaucoup, well, it's thank you very much, you know, and things like that. Then we got on the freight or box cars then, and went up through Paris. I think it took us 2 days and 2 nights to get there, and it would go so slow. And the box cars were, I think they call them 40 and 8s, because that's all they'd haul, 40 men. And once in a while they'd stop. It wouldn't go 15 miles an hour hardly. And I noticed guys, they'd get off and run out, and they'd find a turnip patch and get them some turnips or apples or whatever they could find, and run and get back on the train, you know. The lieutenant on each car, I don't think he liked that too much. It was cold, and finally we built a fire in ours, and I can't imagine how we did it now, but we had a stovepipe stuck over that, just tied up, and the smoke could go outside. Can you imagine a wooden floor, go down metal or something, and had a fire going? And as we got into Paris, we went through a tunnel that knocked that off. But anyhow, that's a few funny things that happened. And when I saw that through that railroad yard, this trainload of boxcars, or not, freight car full of apples, I wanted that thing to stop so we could get some of those apples, but it wouldn't stop. So we finally got to this place the next evening, and this fellow came out with these nice shiny boots and everything. We thought, boy, we've really made it now. And he said, you're going to have a warm supper. And we got inside, and they gave us sea rations again. We'd been eating that for 3 days. and cold. But anyhow, we did find some apples that we ate, I remember. And from there, we finally went to this reinforcement battalion that finally decided then that I would be in the cooks would go into infantry, and my number, which was a typist clerk number, would be sent to the half-track drivers. We'll make half-track drivers out of us. So that's my first experience in driving a half-track, and started from there.
Can you describe what your living conditions were like whenever you arrived at the front? You described how it was up to the point where you got there.
We, in this reinforcement battalion, just before I was assigned to this 275th they were in rest area at that time because of the Bulge. They come back, and that's when they wanted a replacement. So they came to this camp to get us, and it was cold. I could hear the buzz bombs going over. Mm-hmm. And in fact, when the thing dropped, it would vibrate our little cot, you know, a little bit. There wasn't very many of them, but once in a while, you'd hear that thing going over, a buzz bomb. And then the next morning, this truck came and called my name, and we got on that truck and went to the 275th Armored Field Artillery Battalion. And of course, they had taught us how to drive a half-track. They said always drive it in there and back in so you can take it out, fill it up with gas, and be ready to go. So when I found that I was the driver of the lead half-track that goes into combat with a major standing up looking outside, that was exciting. And of course it was ice and cold and snowy and with chains on a half-track. Why they had chains on it, but it really vibrated, a lot of noise. So that was our first entrance into combat. Went up near where St. Vith happened to be. It used to be because it was blown apart. Mm-hmm. And joined, then reset so they could push on in toward Berlin. Mm-hmm. And so the infantry goes first and our artillery followed. And with me, a half-track driver, I was with a radio when the forward observer to get up so far that it was hard to get the message back because he'd keep moving. And he would relay the message if he saw something he wanted to fire on. Mm-hmm. And he would give the direction center. And that's what I had to repeat. Or whoever was with me would repeat. So right on the Belgian border, in between Belgium and Germany, is where we stayed all night in some houses and drove the half-track right up to the side of the house and put the car down to the window, and this men in there had bandages around their head, and they were so helpful to fix candles for us and different things. I just remember the candles because a lot of people had candles, and so I slept with them, and another fellow slept in another house for 2 nights. And the next day, our lieutenant came up with some food and stuff, and he saw those German uniforms outside. And he got to investigating and found that these 2 men had their dog tags on. They were German soldiers. And they took them back and took the ladies with them, you know, for doing that, I guess. I don't know. Never did know what happened. But I thought that was unusual. Mm-hmm. How the Lord looks after you. Mm-hmm. There I was sleeping in that house, and big house, and this other guy and I are in our sleeping bag, you know.
That's interesting.
I think that afterwards, that's when we went back to why a rest area so quick, you know, I don't remember now how long it was, but we went back in near the age Belgium, and that's where we stayed in this person's house for the rest area. Mm-hmm. And got acquainted with him. And that was 2 or 3 days, and then went back up and went on into Germany then. Of course, we moved from the 7th Armored Division to the 9th Army. We went through Holland and into Germany and crossed the Rhine up in northern Germany. And of course, we saw a lot of dead German soldiers been laying there all through the winter, you know, you might say, frozen. And dead GIs too. Now it seemed to me like they were picked up pretty early. It really makes you feel bad when you see. I know we went up to one place after we crossed the Rhine, and there were 5 GIs laying outside the door. So this was kind of a dairy. He had a dairy, and we walked into his house, and he said, "Take anything you want." And so of course they looted things, you know, and he found an American gold piece. One of the boys did, and I found a dollar bill. It was about this long, a American dollar bill. Now those real old ones. And I said, "How did you get this?" And he said, "My brother in Chicago."
Oh, really?
But he had that dairy and took care of the cows there, you know. Sometimes you'd see dead cows, you know, hit by artillery. And but they were kind to us, and this of course we would, I remember the day before we crossed the Rhine, and we was up there about maybe 10 days in one place, getting ready to cross the Rhine from Germany, and from Belgium into Germany, crossing the Rhine there. Anyhow, they had us to wait and wait. So this boy, he wanted fried chicken, so he shot one of these hens. And we had fried chicken that night in butter. And then, of course, when the artillery, before we crossed on the pontoon bridges that they had made, the Air Force brought the paratroopers, 82nd Airborne Division, over. You could see them, the planes, and I don't know just where they landed, but you could see them going over. And after a while, then our artillery started firing, just one right after the other, you know. And then we crossed sometime the next day. I don't know how long that went on, but we crossed on the pontoon bridge, and that took a long time. And the tanks and everything going on that bridge, unusual. And
was it pretty safe crossing those bridges where they worked pretty well?
Yeah, they worked. Yeah. It's funny. I don't know. I think they were like big inner tubes. I don't know, pontoons that was airtight that would hold you up and all tied together. And I can't imagine all those tanks and everything at once, how that was anchored at the end. But anyhow, that's what we went over on. And that evening, we were at this place, and here comes a German soldier up with his hands up right by our tank. And I was on guard duty, and they saw that he didn't have anything, and they put him in where we were sleeping. We stood guard, you know, all through the night. Somebody did. We take turns every 2 hours. And they put him in there with us, and he laid down and went to sleep. And I can't imagine that now, but that's what happened. And of course, then the guard, he'd come in and wake up the other guy, and he'd take his place. And but anyhow, this liaison plane would fly around, and finally he landed, you know, before dark. The artillery, Air Force, or artillery liaison plane would do that, and direct fire too, you know. So that's how that stopped. And then that night, it's when that infantry company came up there and said, "What are you doing here? This is our objective right here." And they came back with 80 prisoners of an anti-aircraft battalion over there. And so that's what that machine gun fire was, I guess.
Wow.
But we never had any hand-to-hand thing like you imagine it is in the artillery. The infantry is the one that has those, you know, unless you get pushed in different places.
So whenever you were in the middle of all this, it was about what, around November, December of '44?
Let's see. Yeah. Yeah.
So-
Thanksgiving Day, and then after that, Christmas.
When the Battle of the Bulge started, which I think was around Christmas Eve
Yeah.
or so, could you see the effects of that where you were?
Oh,
Were you
yeah.
guys pushed back or anything? Or?
I wasn't pushed back. That's when I joined the outfit. You see, that's where I think I was very fortunate
I see.
that I got there as a replacement, you know. And so those other boys in the outfit, they really had it rough. And because they lined those there at Malmedy, just lined to ambush these Americans and just shot them all. But some of them lived to tell the story. And that was right close to where I was at St. Vith, Malmedy. And you get a map and you look on the road, you know, there's Malmedy and so on.
Can you describe for me the sounds and the smells of just the battlefield?
Well, a lot of gunpowder, like gunpowder, smoke, but the shrill when you first get in or any time, you know, shell coming in, or wham, you know, well, that's your shell going out, you know, and so you kind of learn that noise,
can go in that one
You're
male.
pretty shook up to start with, no doubt. Nervous. But I was never in any real close combat like an infantryman. Or,
So how far were you away from that at any given time?
well, probably 3 or 4 miles, or 5 or 7. 7 at the most, because when it became 7 miles, then we back up and move up the guns. But before that, we would, our outfit, my unit with a half-track, with a radio, would move up with a forward observer pretty close to him, see, to relay the message until he moved up, and he needed us to move up, see. That's how it worked.
Can you describe your duties during a mission? Like what problems did you encounter, you know, a lot of times, and like how did your work help contribute to the success of your group or the division you were in or the unit you were in?
Well, we would take, when they ordered us to move up, when the infantry was moving so far and the forward observer was too far away, we would see that ahead of time, so we would go up and reconnaissance to find a house for our fire direction center, and so they could have a good, safe place to do their firing directions and from the forward observer. And so that was our job, is to operate this radio or find a place. We was kind of really not doing anything, only going up and find a good place for them, and then operate the radio. So it was really, I was pretty lucky. I didn't like the guns anyhow, you know. Too much noise, they go off, the recoil, everything. But that was what our job was, is to operate the radio on the half-track from the forward observer to the gun.
I see.
I remember one time he said there's machine gun fire coming out of this house, and he gave her orders and numbers, so many yards, and say 1 round or 2 rounds, and so I'd relay that message to the fire direction, and the gun would say, on the way, and almost immediately he would say, well, he was over 30 yards, reset your gun. So reset your guns, and I'd say, on the way, 2 rounds, and then he would say, mission accomplished, and things like that, you know.
Can you tell me about a couple of your more memorable experiences that you had while you were over in the European theater?
I think the most was in that forest, when we had to go in between the forward observer and the guns. Got in this forest, and that's where we saw these dead German soldiers in the forest, and this German tank was knocked out, and we just thought everybody's dead, you know. So we walked over to this tank, and never had a rifle with me or anything, and looked around and talked, and finally went back to our half-track, and all of a sudden an arm went up. One of those German soldiers raised his arm and I guess wanted help, and we thought he was going to throw a grenade at us. Anyhow, we went over to him, and he was an older person. He wasn't young. He looked like he's middle-aged, and his boots were frozen to him. It looked like, because we tried to untie him and send him in time. About that time, one of our ambulances went by, and we hollered at him, and he backed in there and picked him up. But I never did know what happened to him. But anyhow, that was a scary time, because it was kind of a surprise.
Any other memorable experiences you can think of?
Well, I don't know. Of course, after the war, I mean, almost the end of the war, you see, there wasn't a whole lot of activity going on. We were moving forward as a group. We was on this road one night. We traveled 2 days, I think, overnight, and traveled at night, and little blinking lights on. And I think the closest we became being hit by a shell or anything was in a tank. A German tank was firing on a crossroads, and we happened to be close to that crossroads because there were 2 or 3 shells landing pretty close, and one of them threw some dirt on our Jeep, and so we thought, where's that coming from, you know? and wasn't long till that it quit. That tank got knocked out. And then we stayed in a nice house up there that evening. Found a place to take a shower and stuff. But anyhow, I remember that. Then we moved on from Holland into Germany, and that part, and further up in Germany, moved pretty fast. Finally wound up near Leipzig, I think you pronounce it, about 70 miles from Berlin, west of Berlin, and weren't doing very much there.
Did you come across any former POW camps or concentration camps, anything like that?
No, the first Germans I saw, the prisoners, were in a boxcar, like a coal car, opened at the top, and that thing was full of German prisoners. The first, that's before I even went into combat and saw those prisoners in there. No, I didn't see the reinforcement, or like those where they killed them and all that. I didn't see that, but I saw the boys of the 106th Infantry Division. So many of them got killed and were taken prisoner because they came up there to reinforce in the Bulge, and they never even had their guns out of Cosmoline, they said. They weren't really prepared for that. The German just pushed right on through them. And it's such confusion there. And so when I went back to the hospital, that's when I saw some of those fellows. They'd lost a lot of weight, skin and bones.
What was your impression of the German soldiers and their equipment and skills, things like that?
Well, the only thing I saw was what was torn up, burned up or something, and I did see, what surprised me was some horse-drawn artillery along the road where the horses were killed, and the horse-drawn artillery. Not a lot, but I did see it, you know, I don't know how much.
Were there any casualties in your group of people?
No. One boy told me before I got into the outfit, he was in the Bulge that day that ran back, and he was captured, but then his outfit captured him back and brought him back. So it was total confusion there because the Germans just pushed right in and hardly anybody knew where they were at. Now that would be bad. So I'm thankful that I joined the outfit when they came back out of there.
Did you encounter any friendly fire incidents?
No, not personally, no. I hear some buzz bombs go over and things like that, but nothing close. In fact, that buzz bomb, when it did land, it would vibrate your cot, you know, and I don't know how far away it was.
By friendly fire, though, I mean
Rifle fire.
Like from your own friends?
Oh.
Like you were wounded?
Oh, yeah, that was an accident after, when we just about, the war was about over, sometime in April 10th or 25th, somewhere in there, I got it written down there, that we were sitting around this table with a group of us, and nothing happening, and some of the boys got their pistols out. I just had an old rusty one I found in the fire, out of a fire, and mine wouldn't even work. But this boy had a 25 caliber pistol he'd clip, you know, and play with it just like the little kid would. And we got to talking, and he put it back in. Of course, I didn't know it. And the gun went off, and that fellow sitting over there across the table, he said to me, "Did he hit you?" And I said, "I don't know, I better get up." Well, I don't know why I said that, but when I got up, I got kind of faint-like and sick in my stomach, and I pulled my trousers down, and I saw I was hit right here in the hip. And it didn't go through, it didn't hit a bone or anything. It really wasn't that painful. Of course, they rushed me right and called the ambulance, you know, and gave me some medicine, and took me back to the... I didn't even have a chance to pick up the stuff that I picked up. I don't know how I got back with what I did. I thought I'd be back to my outfit. And I had several things I didn't want to keep, you know. But anyhow, they took me right back to the little, in an old house where the doctor was, and he put some disinfectant on him, and it didn't go through my leg. It was just lodged in my thigh. And
You said you had the bullet?
Pardon?
You said you had the bullet?
Yeah. It's all wrapped up in there. You have to tear it apart to see it, but it's in there. We got a knife or something.
What? Oh, I have mine on me. There we go. Do you mind opening
No,
it up and
no.
showing it?
Long time since I've seen it.
There you go. I don't want to rip it all apart or anything.
It's all right.
That's it there, huh?
25 caliber.
And it didn't hit the bone or anything,
No.
you said it just went through,
Mm,
stuck in your
right.
hip there, huh? Right through
Could have hit me in the head or
groin.
the stomach or anything, but it just went right in there.
Wow. Lucky to be alive.
Yeah, yeah, it could have been your head.
How did the civilian population treat you as you came through their towns?
Well, all right, they didn't, like I say, those two in Belgium, those people were nice. And the Germans, of course, they were gone usually. I remember I rode in here at one town there. We raided the chicken house and got eggs and had fried eggs for breakfast. You know, that was unusual. Or anything we could find, you know, different. Did that. Yeah, they weren't bad to us. Of course, we just didn't see much of them, you know. So after the war was over, then they were friendly to us, just be good to us, you know. And, I don't know, I guess they expected us, because a lot of soldiers, you'd find a candy bar or something they gave the kids, you know, and they were really reaching out to get those, you know.
Was there anything you did special for good luck or any kind of, anything that gave you comfort or anything like that?
Well, I had my little New Testament with me, and I know someone sent me a real nice card to keep with me at all times. I thought that was nice. I think it's in that book, that brown book over there somewhere. It's probably over there in the box.
Were you awarded any medals or citations or anything like that?
Well, I got them there on the, the Victory Medal, American Theater Ribbon, European, African, Middle Eastern Theater Ribbon with 3 bronze battle stars, 3 overseas service bars, Good Conduct Medal, Army of Occupation Medal.
Great. How often did you stay in touch with your family?
Oh, probably 2 weeks or so, right? And when something good would happen, I remember writing when I went to the hospital and when the war was over and things like that. Couldn't tell where you were at, you know.
Did you have, everything had to go through sensors?
Yeah.
What did you think of officers and fellow soldiers?
They were real good to us, yeah.
How did people entertain themselves? Like, what did you do when you had some downtime?
Well, when we'd get together and talk about things that happened, you know, I remember one fellow, Sergeant Shriver, he would talk and tell interesting stories. He's just a good talker, you know. I remember having a flat tire on a Jeep. I was driving at night, and this one fella, his name was Sadler, and he's always as happy as he could be. And here we was driving in the convoy with little bitty parking lights, muddy, and he said, "We got a flat tire." So we got out, and he started whistling. Just whistled all the time he's changing the tire, and I said, "How can you do that?" He was something. Didn't bother him at all.
That's a good attitude to have, though, I guess.
Yeah.
How would you perceive the American attitudes towards the civilian populations as you came through town and used their houses and their...
The civilians? Well, they were friendly. Not real friendly, but we didn't see many. I mean, it seemed like they got out of the way when we were going through. But afterwards, they got friendlier, came out, and of course we couldn't understand anything they were saying, you know. And, but they were friendly, I'd say.
Did they greet you as liberators, or did they look at you as invaders?
Well, I'd say as liberators, because they weren't mean to us. They would help us out at different times.
Do you recall where you were during VE Day, when VE Day actually happened?
I was in the hospital, May the 8th, 1945. I was in Paris in the hospital.
How did that make you feel?
Well, great. Of course, we thought we was going to be in Berlin, you know, right away. Didn't get to go to Berlin, but in fact, I didn't get to go back to find my outfit again after I was in the hospital for 35 days. They removed that bulletin after I was there 12 days, and then during that time, they didn't do anything with us. We could go out and see Paris, get passed out of the hospital, come back, and in fact, I got to see an opera there, in a big opera house. I got pictures of them, and all different things, ride on the subway, and just see Paris like you would New York, you know. And then they one day called our names, and we got on a passenger train and rode back across France and Belgium and into Germany, and I thought I was going to get back to my outfit. Well, finally we stayed in this reinforcement battalion for quite a while, marching out into the country before lunch, and we'd sit out there and talk for a while and then march back or walk back. We didn't do any marching there like we did in training here. And so we did that, I don't know, a week, I guess, because it was part of these guys would leave, and others would leave, and others coming in. Finally, I said, when am I getting out of here? And he said, what's your name? And I told him, he said, we didn't even know you were here. Didn't have any record of me. My records didn't come from the hospital, I guess. I don't know where they lost me, but I saw, I got a date in here somewhere where I hadn't had any mail for about 3 months, I think, before I got any mail or anything.
So how long
I was assigned to that outfit?
How long were you with that outfit from the time you got back from the hospital till they found out that they didn't have any record of you being there? Was it a month or so, or a few weeks?
Just a couple of weeks probably, because there was a lot of activity. And I thought it was so funny that these new soldiers would come over to replace us, and this little sergeant, he'd go to eat our lunch. We'd get our mess gear, you know, and he'd have to stick it in the hot water and rinse it off, and then he'd say, fall in or march, you know. We didn't pay any attention to him. We just walked on, you know. How can he tell us like he was in basic training again, you know? That was funny. And nobody paid any attention to him. We just walked on to eat lunch.
Was there any talk of your unit going to the Pacific after?
Well, we thought we might go to the Pacific. That was before I went to the hospital. And so maybe they did, I don't know. I kind of doubt if they did. And I never could contact anybody to find out.
You stayed in Germany
A year after the war was over.
Anything interesting that you saw while you were there after the war ended?
Yes, we were in the reinforcement battalion, and a whole freight train, whole boxcars would come in with new replacements for the people that are going home. And these replacements would come in, and we had to read the list and make sure that they were there. And some of them were missing. They got sick on the way. They left them in the hospital, maybe in Paris or somewhere. So we had to make sure who was there and who wasn't on that list. And then there'd be people coming in with several points, like from Czechoslovakia or somewhere, and they'd have 100 and some odd points. They'd been in Africa and everywhere else, and they were going home right away, see. So that's what the troop movement office did. And while I was there, the Nuremberg Trials were starting and going on. They got them together there in Nuremberg, and we were only 10 miles from Nuremberg. And they gave us a pass one day, and I got to see the Nuremberg Trials in person, and Goring and Hess and all those other guys. And so that was one thing that I was really proud of, and I got to see that. And the guards at the door and how they guarded them. You know, somebody watched them all the time. And in fact, Goring, you know, they were going to go hang him in the next morning. Well, they found him dead. He'd taken something and killed himself.
A cyanide capsule or something, I think.
And there was some other one, I don't remember what his name was, but he took a poison pill just as they captured him. And, but I remember that. And then it wasn't long after that I got a pass, 3-day pass, to go to Garmisch-Partenkirchen, which is south of Munich, where they used to have the Winter Olympics, the bobsleds and everything, the skiing. And that's where I learned to ski a little bit. And Ober-Ammergau is where they had the Passion Play once every 10 years before the war started. And that was very interesting to see that. And then we got to go up on the mountain, the highest mountain in Germany, where they said you could see different countries on a clear day. But it was, we went up on a cable car so far and you couldn't see anything. But anyhow, that was great to have been there. And,
when were you actually discharged then?
well, let's see, it was May the 18th in 44. Yeah, no, it would be 44.
45.
No, 45. Wait a minute. Should have been 46.
46.
44 to 46, yeah.
Did you actually, in the Nuremberg trials, did you see any of the Nazis executed or anything? Were you?
Oh, no, I saw them. I got the picture of them there somewhere. It's in that box over there.
Okay.
No, this was, they weren't really, hadn't been going too long, you know, in that at that time. So the ones that were executed, I read about it in the paper after I got home, you know. But I'm thankful I did get to see them in person there.
So after you came back to the U.S., after you finished your time in the service, did you work or did you go to school or did you take any of the benefits of the GI Bill?
I, of course, was raised on the farm, and my uncle wanted me to run a farm when I got back, and he said, and so the GI program for people in the service, in fact, a person then could get a tractor or machinery where they had priority. So I got a H International tractor because of stamps or something priority, you know, and little equipment, and I think it was $1,645, less than a lawnmower today. And started farming and took that training there about fertilizer and so forth, agronomy, through a government program. I forget how long it lasted, but Mr. Moffat at Modesto was the instructor, and Mr. Bibb at Palmyra.
Did you continue any of your relationships that you, with any friends? Did you make any friends in the service, and did you continue them after the war?
Yeah, not that was with my combat outfit. I just lost communication with them. This fellow, a real good friend of mine, Doug Strange, from Oklahoma. We were really good friends and worked together in that troop movement office. And then I went to see him. I've seen him twice, you know, afterwards.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Yes, I'm sure it did. the training was good, and the officers were good, and saw to our safety and so forth.
What are the experiences that stand out with you after all this time? You know, are there any experiences that really helped, you know, drive your thinking or anything like that after the war, or kind of stuck with you?
Well, I was proud to be a part of it, just proud to be an American and be a part of it. And today I see people, especially on college campuses, protesting the war, not supporting our president or the troops like they should. And it just makes me realize that somebody didn't do their job teaching history, what we really had to do over there with Hitler and the regime there. I think if they knew that, they would feel differently, and they do really what freedom is. They just don't realize until you see these soldiers, see these prisoners of war coming home this morning, going back to Texas. That's really something to see those fellas that have been prisoners of war get to come home.
How did your service and experiences affect your life? Did it have any influence on you?
Well, I don't know, other than just experiences through taking responsibility or helping others out. I guess the discipline would help. It's something you don't realize.
Looking back and seeing the importance of World War II in American history, what would you say is the most significant result from the U.S. having won the war? Do you see anything today that's a direct result of the U.S. having won the war? And
well, people realize, it took a long time for them to realize what freedom was, and then the Berlin Wall and how that came down. I was on the Siegfried line where they had the pyramids built for tanks couldn't cross, and to see that around the border of Germany and the gates and things, you remember those things, and but I don't know, it's helped me realize what freedom is, and I don't know how to express it to others and say, I realize what freedom is. And I appreciate the boys that are willing to sacrifice. You know, they're not afraid. All those pilots that came back, you know, showed them this morning going home. They were fortunate, very fortunate.
is there anything else you'd like to add as we conclude the interview here?
I don't know how much we got here. Did we get this in about these?
Yeah, well, I guess what I'll do is we'll
Let's
reposition the camera on the table and we'll lay some things out. We can go ahead
Uh-huh.
and start talking about some of that. So
That's just the next picture, okay?
now these are guys that you were with.
After the war was over,
Uh-huh.
I had a troop movement office, and we would move the new troops in. There's right at this caserne, they call it, like a barracks. They had that tomb here for the unknown German soldiers. You can read that on there. There's an old German tank. This was in combat in the snow in Belgium.
That's okay.
That's the only one that got in actually combat.
Now is that you there?
Yeah. I don't have my helmet on. I don't have a helmet liner, you know, if you're here for it. Got my rifle across my leg. Now this is up on top of that highest mountain in Germany, and there, this woman is spreading manure. And this man is spreading manure with a liquid tank with oxen. And then here's the Autobahn, which was Route 55,
Mm-hmm.
4-lane. Germany, Hitler said
Mhm.
nobody else has got one like that. And that's where I was up on the mountain learning to ski. I didn't go on the mountain to ski, but that was right here. You remember the Bush Bavarian, when they started advertising Bush Bavarian beer,
Mhm.
the mountain,
Mhm.
the beautiful lake. That's where that picture is.
Oh, I see.
And that hotel there where I got 3-day pass
Mm-hmm.
and stayed there. That's up on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
They said there's that picture.
It's pretty.
And I can't believe how small those are.
Mm-hmm.
The German photographer finished those for us, developed them after the war was over. I don't have many pictures in my uniform. Really, I had one, but I couldn't find it. It was a bigger one. That's where I trained all the troops came in. Unload them, and sometimes they come in 2 o'clock in the morning. It's in the office there. This fellow was the head sergeant of the office. He was from Plainfield. It's funny, he called me up one day after he got home, I don't know how long it was, and he just never said anything. I says, "Is this Lawfer?" And then he said he almost fell off the stool. Couldn't recognize his voice. He's from Plainfield.
I'll be darned. Now these pictures are all in Germany here?
Yeah. At the 90th Reinforcement Battalion, and a trainload of replacements. Those guys, they came through Paris. Some of them didn't even have shoes. They sold their shoes to the people in there, and sold their cigarettes to the people in Paris. Very cool. 90th Reinforcement Battalion. There's a Red Cross, brought some stuff out there today. And it's Doug and I see the map up on the wall there. I don't know how I got those, but that's from Germany, or Berlin.
Wow.
Mostly just us guys there in the office. This be out here by the wood pile. See how they stack their wood?
Oh, wow.
Really neat. We had a Korean boy work with us. See, it's a German, you might say a German barracks. They called it the Kaserne. German soldiers used to be there. And they had offices there. Could you do that?
No, I can't. I've never been able to do that.
I had a guy lay on top of me to do that.
Oh, I
so
see.
If you want to fool somebody. We would always taking pictures. There's just an ordinary house there. There's some little boys. One little boy came by the window there in the office one day, and he spoke perfect English. And I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Well, I was born in Vienna." I said, "What are you going to do when you grow up?" He says, "I'm going to be an electrical engineer and go to America."
Wow.
He's just a little boy.
He knew what he was going to do.
Yeah.
So this is the picture from the war criminals trial, right? That's Hess and then Goering right there.
I don't know if this is just an old one, I don't know how come we got two of them there.
Mhm.
That might show up, I don't know.
Floor plan of the courtroom.
Nuremberg was really bombed out. I mean, the train station really tore up.
It's interesting. Give you a background here on each of the criminals.
You want to copy that so you can take
Yeah,
it with you?
yeah, that'd be great. So then this is the family that you stayed with
Yeah,
when you were in
in
Holland
Belgium.
here?
Mhm.
In Belgium, okay.
Mhm.
Put that over here. What else have you got here?
Let's see. Just look here. These little shoes I got in Holland. This little thing in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
These are pictures in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the hospital there. And there's a nurse there at the hospital. You're familiar with that.
Mm-hmm. Arc de Triomphe.
There's the opera house. I got to see an opera there.
Uh-huh.
And Napoleon's, all those things, they were like caskets or something built up here, all in the big, all the way around different people.
Mhm.
It's interesting to see there in Paris. I don't know, I think that's probably all.
Okay. Great. Well, we'll go ahead and stop there. Yeah. Go ahead and hit pause.